The bitter wind howled across the frozen landscape of planet GX-227 as Dr. Kate Miller fought with her research vessel's failing controls. Ice crystals formed on the inside of her cockpit window, and warning lights flashed across every screen. The small ship bucked and trembled, fighting against the magnetic storm that had appeared out of nowhere. Come on," she muttered, her fingers flying across the control panel. The ship's computer kept repeating the same message. Warning, critical system failure. Emergency landing protocols engage. Kate had spent 3 years studying extreme environments, but nothing had prepared her for this. The mission was supposed to be simple: collect ice core samples from GX-227's polar region and return to the research station. Instead, her instruments had detected an unusual energy signature deep beneath the ice, and her curiosity had gotten the better of her. The ship dropped another 1,000 feet in seconds. Kate's stomach lurched as she saw the endless white expanse rushing up to meet her. With one last desperate attempt, she pulled up on the controls, managing to level the ship slightly before impact. The crash wasn't as bad as it could have been, but it was still brutal. The ship skidded across the ice for nearly half a mile, leaving a deep groove in its wake. When it finally stopped, Kate found herself hanging upside down in her safety harness, her breath coming in short gasps that formed little clouds in the rapidly cooling air. She released the harness and dropped to what had been the ceiling, wincing as her shoulder hit the metal surface. The emergency lights cast an eerie red glow throughout the cabin. Kate did a quick self-assessment. No broken bones, just bruises and a few cuts. She had been lucky. The same couldn't be said for her ship. The main power core was dead, and the backup systems were failing one by one. Kate pulled herself to the emergency supply locker and grabbed the survival suit. It would help, but without the ship's heating systems, she knew she was in serious trouble. Her emergency beacon activated automatically during the crash, sending out a distress signal that any passing ship could detect. But GX-227 was far from regular trade routes, and the research station wouldn't expect her back for another 3 days. Status report, Kate commanded the ship's computer, her voice steady despite the growing cold. Life support systems, critical. Main power, offline. Backup power, 17% and falling. External temperature, -70 degrees Celsius and dropping. Night cycle beginning in approximately 2 hours. Estimated survival time without heating systems, 4 hours. Kate pulled the survival suit tighter around herself and checked its heating elements. They would last maybe 12 hours at full power, but she would need at least 48 hours of heat to survive until rescue could arrive. Moving to the ship's window, she wiped away the frost to look outside. The sun was setting, painting the ice in shades of purple and deep blue. Beautiful, but deadly. The magnetic storm that had brought her down still raged in the upper atmosphere, creating waves of shifting color like some deadly aurora. She began gathering everything useful she could find. Emergency rations, tools, the ship's portable scanner. If she was going to die here, she would at least die trying to survive. The scanner was still working, and it showed the same strange energy reading that had lured her off course, now stronger than ever. At least I was right about something being here, she told herself, trying to keep her spirits up as she worked. The temperature continued to drop, and ice started forming on every metal surface inside the ship. The last rays of sunlight disappeared below the horizon, plunging the world outside into darkness broken only by the storm above. Kate huddled in what remained of the ship's cabin, watching her breath form larger and larger clouds in the freezing air. She was running out of options, and more importantly, running out of time. As if things couldn't get worse, her scanner suddenly picked up something new. A large object falling through the atmosphere, heading straight for her location. Kate wasn't sure if this meant rescue or more trouble, but in her current situation, she was willing to take either chance. The ground shook as something massive crashed into the ice, less than a mile from Kate's position. Through her frosted window, she could see a trail of fire cutting through the dark sky, followed by the impact that sent tremors through the frozen surface. Her scanner went wild, registering both the energy signature from beneath the ice and new readings from the crash site. Whatever had just landed was giving off heat signatures far higher than any standard ship. Kate debated staying in her relatively safe position, but realized she had little choice. Her survival suit's heating elements were already starting to weaken. Grabbing her emergency pack and portable scanner, she sealed her helmet and stepped out into the brutal cold. The magnetic storm continued to paint the sky in shifting colors, providing just enough light to navigate by. Each step crunched in the hard-packed snow as she made her way toward the new crash site. The closer she got, the more unusual the readings became. The object was cooling rapidly, but still hot enough to melt the surrounding ice. Through the swirling snow, she could make out a shape that looked nothing like any human vessel she'd ever seen. The craft was organic in design, with what appeared to be scales or plates covering its surface. A loud hiss cut through the howling wind. Kate ducked behind an ice formation as a section of the alien ship opened, releasing a cloud of steam into the freezing air. Her suit's external microphone picked up heavy footsteps, each one making the ground vibrate slightly. What emerged from the ship made Kate's breath catch in her throat. The alien stood at least 8 feet tall, its body covered in armored scales that shifted colors in the storm's light. Its broad shoulders and powerful build spoke of a warrior race, and the various weapons attached to its armor confirmed that impression. Most striking were its eyes, vertical pupils in fields of gold that seemed to glow in the darkness. The creature turned its head, scanning the area, and Kate realized too late that her hiding spot wasn't as good as she'd thought. Those predatory eyes locked onto her position immediately. Human. The alien's voice rumbled through her suit's comm system, speaking perfect English. "Show yourself before I am forced to take hostile action." Kate weighed her options quickly. She was freezing, alone, and clearly outmatched. Better to face this directly than risk making an enemy. She stood slowly, hands raised to show she wasn't a threat. "I'm Dr. Kate Miller, research scientist," she called out, trying to keep her voice steady. "My ship crashed in the magnetic storm. I mean no harm." The alien warrior approached her with surprising grace for its size. Up close, she could see patterns in its scales that seemed to shift and move, possibly some form of thermal regulation. It carried itself with obvious military bearing. Head held high, movements precise and controlled. "I am Commander Dax of the Crest Empire," he announced. "My ship was also affected by the storm, a storm that appears to be artificial in nature." Kate's scientific curiosity momentarily overcame her fear. Artificial? That would explain the energy readings I detected. Do you know what's causing it? Dax's head tilted slightly, studying her with those unnerving eyes. "You're shivering, human. Your species is poorly adapted to cold, yet you venture onto an ice world." "We use technology to compensate," Kate replied, trying to stop her teeth from chattering. "Technology that's currently failing. My ship's heating system is dead, and my suit won't last much longer." The alien warrior was silent for a moment, then let out what might have been a laugh. "My people evolved on a world far colder than this. We thrive in these temperatures." He paused, those golden eyes narrowing. "You, however, will freeze to death within hours without proper heat." Kate saw something calculating in those alien eyes, and she wasn't sure she was going to like whatever came next. She was right. "So," Dax said, his mandibles clicking in what might have been amusement, "it seems we have a situation to discuss." Kate stood shivering in the bitter cold, watching as Dax circled around her with predatory grace. Her suit's temperature gauge continued to drop, and frost was forming on her helmet's visor. The magnetic storm above cast shifting shadows across the alien warrior's scales, making him seem even more intimidating. "Your core temperature is dropping rapidly," Dax observed, his head tilting as he studied her. "At this rate, you have perhaps 2 hours before hypothermia becomes severe." "I'm aware of that," Kate replied, trying to keep her voice from shaking. I don't suppose your ship's systems are still working. My ship's power core is damaged beyond repair, he said. However, unlike you fragile humans, my species generates significant body heat. We evolved to survive temperatures far below this. Kate felt her stomach tighten as she realized where this conversation was heading. What exactly are you suggesting? Dax stopped his circling and faced her directly, those golden eyes gleaming. I offer you a choice, human. Either we share body heat or you freeze to death. It's quite simple. Share body heat. With you. Kate took an involuntary step backward. How do I know this isn't some trick to eat me or something? A rumbling sound emerged from Dax that might have been laughter. If I wanted to eat you, you would already be dead. I am a warrior of the Crest Empire. We have honor. He gestured at the brutal landscape around them. Besides, there are more important matters at hand. That storm is not natural, and the energy signature below us suggests advanced technology. Kate's scientific mind raced despite her deteriorating condition. He was right about the storm and the energy readings. And right now, she was too cold to think clearly about either mystery. Her survival suit's heating system gave a final sputter and died completely. How would this even work? She asked, her teeth chattering. You're twice my size and covered in scales. My scales regulate temperature, Dax explained. They can transfer heat quite efficiently. Your survival suit, while primitive, would protect you from their edges. He paused, then added, This is not a negotiation, Dr. Miller. Either we share body heat or you freeze. Those are your options. A particularly fierce gust of wind knocked Kate sideways, and Dax caught her with one massive hand before she could fall. Even through her suit, she could feel the heat radiating from him. It was like standing next to a furnace. Fine. She conceded, knowing she had no real choice. But we do this my way. We need to find shelter first, and I keep my suit on. Acceptable terms, Dax nodded. There's a cave formation near my crash site. The readings suggest it connects to whatever is buried under the ice. They made their way to the cave, Kate struggling against the wind while Dax moved as if it was a mild spring breeze. Inside, the cave walls were smooth, too smooth to be natural. Ancient symbols glowed faintly in the rock, providing dim illumination. Now or never, human, Dax said, settling himself against the cave wall. Your body temperature is reaching dangerous levels. Kate approached cautiously, her scientific training battling with basic survival instincts. Finally, she sat down next to him, and Dax promptly pulled her against his chest. His scales shifted, creating a cocoon of warmth around her. If you tell anyone about this, she started to say. Who would believe either of us? Dax rumbled, amusement in his voice. Now be quiet and warm up. We need to investigate these ruins once you're functional again. As survival situations went, Kate had to admit this wasn't the worst. The heat from Dax's body was already bringing feeling back to her limbs, and her mind was beginning to clear. She found herself studying the ancient symbols on the walls, wondering what secrets this frozen world held. Just so we're clear, she mumbled, already feeling drowsy from the warmth. This doesn't make us friends. Of course not, Dax agreed, his scales shifting to provide even more heat. This is purely survival. Neither of them mentioned how comfortable the arrangement actually was. As the magnetic storm raged outside their shelter, Kate found herself in the bizarre situation of using a massive alien warrior as a heated blanket. More surprising was discovering that Dax was quite talkative when not making threats about sharing body heat. Your species puzzles me, Dax rumbled, his scales shifting slightly as he spoke. So physically weak, yet you've spread across hundreds of worlds. The Crest Empire has been watching your expansion with great interest. Kate, now warm enough to think clearly, couldn't resist her scientific curiosity. And your species? I've never seen anything quite like you in our databases. We are the apex predators of our world, he said with obvious pride. Our homeworld makes this planet seem tropical. We learned to harness the cold, to draw power from it. Your people waste so much energy fighting against hostile environments instead of adapting to them. We adapt through technology, Kate countered, gesturing to her suit. And speaking of technology, these cave markings are fascinating. They're giving off a faint energy signature. Dax's golden eyes narrowed as he studied the glowing symbols. They're similar to ruins we found on other worlds. My mission was to investigate the energy source here. I assume that's not why you crashed on this ice ball. Actually, I was collecting ice core samples when I detected the energy signature. Pure scientific research. Kate paused, then asked, "Why did your people send a warrior to investigate ruins?" "Because warriors are not just fighters, human. We are guardians of knowledge, protectors of our empire's interests. Each of us studies history, science, and philosophy alongside combat arts." His mandibles clicked in what she was beginning to recognize as amusement. "Did you think we were just mindless brutes?" Kate felt herself blush. "Well, your first impression wasn't exactly scholarly, with the whole share body heat or die ultimatum. Efficient problem-solving is also part of our training," Dax replied. "Speaking of which, you're warm enough now. We should explore deeper into the cave system." As they stood, Kate noticed something odd about Dax's movements. "You're injured, aren't you? From the crash." "A warrior does not complain about minor discomfort," he stated, but she could see him favoring his left leg. "A scientist observes and draws conclusions," Kate countered. "Let me look at it. I have medical training." Dax seemed to struggle with this offer, his warrior pride battling with practicality. Finally, he nodded. "Very well. But if you tell anyone I accepted help from a human—" Yes, you'll eat me or something," Kate said, pulling out her medical scanner. "Hold still." As she worked on treating his injured leg, using her emergency medical kit in ways it was definitely not designed for, they continued to exchange information about their cultures. Kate learned about the complex honor system of the Crest Empire, while Dax showed surprising interest in human scientific methods. "Your people's approach to research is chaotic," he observed, "but effective in its own way, like watching a swarm of insects solve a complex problem through sheer persistence." "Did you just compare human scientists to insects?" Kate asked, applying the last bandage to his leg. "A compliment, actually. Insects are highly efficient and adaptable." Dax tested his leg, nodding with approval. "Your treatment is adequate." "You're welcome," Kate said dryly. She checked her scanner again, frowning at the readings. "The energy signature is getting stronger. Something down there is powering up." Dax's expression turned serious. "The magnetic storm is also intensifying. These events are connected." "Agreed. Think the storm was created to protect whatever's down there, or to trap those who come looking for it," Dax suggested grimly. "We should proceed with caution." Kate gathered her equipment, noticing how they had unconsciously started working as a team. "Well, warrior scholar, shall we solve this mystery together?" "It seems we must," Dax replied, his mandibles clicking in what she now recognized as a smile. "Try not to freeze to death along the way." The deeper they ventured into the cave system, the more artificial their surroundings became. Smooth metallic walls replaced natural ice formations, and the glowing symbols grew more numerous. Kate's scanner chirped constantly as the energy readings increased. "Look at this," Kate said, stopping at a section of wall covered in intricate patterns. "These aren't just decorative. They're circuit pathways, but nothing like I've ever seen before." Dax ran his clawed hand along the patterns, his scales shifting colors in response to the energy field. "Ancient tech, far beyond either of our civilizations. We've found similar sites, but never this active." A low hum began vibrating through the structure, making Kate's teeth rattle. She pressed her hand against the wall to steady herself and jumped back when a section of it became transparent, revealing a massive chamber beyond. "That's not possible," she whispered, staring through the now clear wall. "Those energy readings, they're off the scale." The chamber contained what appeared to be a massive machine, its core pulsing with the same colors as the magnetic storm above. Crystalline structures spiraled around it, connected by beams of pure energy. "This is why we were brought down," Dax growled, his warrior instincts clearly on alert. "Look at the entry points." He pointed to several spots where the machine connected to the ceiling. "Those are targeting arrays. This facility is designed to capture ships." Kate checked her scanner again, her scientific mind racing. The magnetic storm isn't natural. It's being generated by this machine. But why? What's the purpose? Before Dax could answer, new sounds echoed through the corridors. Heavy footsteps and the clank of equipment. Both of them quickly pressed themselves against the wall near a corner, Dax instinctively positioning himself in front of Kate. "Pirates," he whispered, his scales darkening to match the shadows. "I recognize their gear. They must have followed one of our distress signals." "The same pirates who've been raiding research stations in this sector?" Kate asked, keeping her voice low. Dax nodded. "They're after the ancient tech. My empire has been tracking their activities. They trigger these facilities deliberately, using the storms to bring down ships, then salvage what they can." A rough voice echoed down the corridor. "2 more ships caught in the net. Start with the alien vessel. Crest Empire tech fetches high prices. Then we'll strip the human research ship." Kate felt Dax tense beside her. She placed a hand on his arm, surprised at her own instinct to calm the warrior. "We need a plan. You know their tactics. What would they expect?" "Direct confrontation. It's what a Crest warrior would normally do." His golden eyes gleamed in the dim light. "Which is why we won't give them that." Kate smiled, already catching his drift. "The machine's control systems should be accessible through these circuit pathways. If I can understand the base code, you can turn their trap against them." Dax finished. "I'll create a distraction. Your smaller size will let you move through the maintenance passages we passed." "That's actually a good plan," Kate admitted. "But you're still injured. Against how many pirates?" "I am a Crest warrior," he reminded her, mandibles clicking in anticipation. "And they are merely scavengers. Besides," he glanced down at her with what could only be described as a grin, "I've learned that size isn't everything." Kate rolled her eyes but couldn't help smiling. "Did you just make a joke? Maybe sharing body heat affected your brain." "Focus on the mission, scientist," Dax rumbled, but there was warmth in his tone. "We have pirates to deal with and an ancient mystery to solve." As they prepared to execute their plan, Kate realized how quickly she'd come to trust this alien warrior. From survival necessity to actual teamwork, it was the kind of cultural exchange he never expected to experience. "Try not to get shot," she whispered, preparing to slip away into the maintenance tunnel. "Try not to press any buttons that might blow up the planet," Dax countered. Both of them knew that what they'd discovered here was bigger than their individual missions. Whatever this facility was, it couldn't be left in the hands of pirates, or perhaps anyone else. Kate crawled through the narrow maintenance tunnel, guided by the glowing circuit patterns and her scanner. Behind her, she could hear the chaos Dax was creating. Roars, weapons fire, and the sounds of pirates yelling in panic. She allowed herself a small smile, imagining the sight of the massive warrior in action. The control room, when she finally found it, was a marvel of ancient engineering. Holographic displays floated in the air, showing the facility's systems in patterns she was only beginning to understand. The magnetic storm generator pulsed at the center of it all, its power core thrumming with barely contained energy. "Okay, think," she muttered to herself, studying the displays. "If I was building a ship-catching trap, where would I put the off switch?" A massive explosion rocked the facility, nearly knocking her off her feet. Her comm unit crackled to life with Dax's voice. "Whatever you're planning, do it quickly. These pirates have heavy weapons, and they're getting desperate." Kate's fingers flew across the holographic controls, her scientific training helping her decode the ancient symbols. "I think I've almost got it. Just keep them busy for another minute." "Easy for you to say," Dax growled, followed by the sound of something large being thrown against a wall. "You're not the one wrestling with a cybernetically enhanced pirate captain." The control room suddenly blazed with red light as security protocols activated. Kate had triggered something, but not what she'd intended. The magnetic storm above began to intensify, and she could feel the facility's power core ramping up to dangerous levels. Dax," she called over the comm. "We might have a small problem." "Define small," he replied between what sounded like punches. "The facility thinks it's under attack. It's increasing power to the storm generator. If it keeps going." She checked the readings and winced. "It'll tear apart anything in orbit, including any potential rescue ships." "Can you shut it down?" "Not from here. The main controls are locked out." Kate studied the displays frantically. "But I might be able to overload it. Make it burn itself out." "Do it," Dax shouted. "The pirates are falling back. They know something's wrong." Kate took a deep breath and began the overload sequence. The facility's lights pulsed faster, and she could feel the floor vibrating beneath her feet. Warning messages flashed across the holographic displays in dozens of alien languages. "Get out of there, Dax. This whole place is going to." The ceiling above her exploded inward as the pirate captain, a massive cyborg with glowing red implants, crashed through it. Behind him, Dax dropped down into the control room, his scales covered in battle damage, but his eyes blazing with warrior fury. "Get away from those controls," the pirate captain roared, raising a weapon that looked like it could punch through a tank. Kate didn't move from the console. "You don't understand. This whole facility is about to overload. We'll all die if we don't get out." "Let it burn," the pirate snarled. "This technology is worth dying for." Dax moved with shocking speed for his size, tackling the pirate captain before he could fire. They crashed into the ancient machinery, trading blows that would have killed a human instantly. Kate continued the overload sequence, trying to ignore the brutal fight happening just feet away. "The system's going critical," she shouted. 10 seconds. Dax finally gained the upper hand, slamming the pirate captain's head against the floor with enough force to crack the ancient metal. Time to leave. He grabbed Kate around the waist and charged for the exit as the facility began to tear itself apart. They sprinted through collapsing corridors, barely staying ahead of the chain reaction. Behind them, the pirate captain's scream of rage was cut short by an explosion. They burst out of the cave entrance into the frozen night, still running as the ground shook beneath them. The magnetic storm above swirled into a vortex before imploding with a thunderous crack, leaving the sky clear and star-filled for the first time since they'd crashed. Kate and Dax collapsed in the snow, breathing hard, watching as the ancient facility collapsed in on itself, taking its secrets with it. "Well," Kate managed between breaths, "at least we're not cold anymore." Dax's answering laugh echoed across the ice. The twin suns of GX-227 rose over the horizon, casting long shadows across the ice field where Kate and Dax sat waiting for rescue. The remains of the ancient facility had created a deep crater in the ice, steam still rising from its depths. Above them, the sky was finally clear, the magnetic storm nothing but a memory. "Your people will be here soon," Dax observed, his scales shifting to reflect the morning light. "As will mine. This will be interesting." Kate nodded, checking her scanner one last time. First official contact between humans and a Crest Empire, happening because we had to cuddle for warmth. The diplomats are going to love this. "We did not cuddle," Dax protested, his mandibles clicking in embarrassment. "We engaged in tactical heat sharing for survival purposes." Before Kate could tease him further, her scanner picked up multiple ships entering the atmosphere. 2 distinct groups: the sleek research vessels of her people and the more organic-looking ships of the Crest Empire. "Here we go," she muttered, standing up. Dax rose beside her, drawing himself up to his full impressive height. The ships landed in a cautious formation, each keeping their distance from the other. Armed troops emerged from the Crest vessels, while human security forces took up defensive positions around their ships. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. That's when Kate did something that would later be recorded in both species' historical archives. She walked straight into the middle of the standoff, turned to both sides, and declared loudly, "If anyone starts shooting, I'm going to be extremely disappointed." Dax's rumbling laugh broke the tension as he moved to stand beside her. "As will I. Lower your weapons, warriors of the crest. These humans have proven themselves worthy allies." The next few hours were a flurry of activity. Medical teams checked them both over, debriefings were held, and preliminary diplomatic contacts were established. Kate found herself explaining again and again about the ancient facility, the pirates, and yes, the whole body heat-sharing situation. "So you're telling me," the human diplomatic chief said, looking bewildered, "that you survived by cuddling with an alien warrior?" "Tactical heat-sharing," Kate and Dax corrected simultaneously, then looked at each other in surprise. The incident became the cornerstone of human-crest relations. Kate's scientific approach, combined with Dax's warrior wisdom, had uncovered and defeated a significant threat to both their peoples. The pirates' operation was exposed, leading to a joint task force that would eventually dismantle their entire organization. 3 months later, at the first official diplomatic summit between humans and the Crest Empire, Kate found herself standing next to a familiar towering figure. The delegates seemed to be getting along well, she observed, watching human scientists eagerly discussing thermal regulation with Crest warriors. "Indeed," Dax agreed, "though these heating units they install are unnecessary. The room is barely cold enough to be comfortable." Kate smiled. "Not all of us can be walking furnaces, you know." "Speaking of which," Dax said, his golden eyes glinting with mischief, "I notice you haven't included our tactical heat-sharing situation in your official report." "Neither have you," she countered. "I checked your warrior's log. Some details are better left to memory," he rumbled. "Though I must admit, for a fragile human scientist, you proved to be an acceptable survival partner." "High praise indeed," Kate laughed. "For a scary alien warrior, you make a pretty good heated blanket." Their friendship became legendary in both cultures, opening doors for further cooperation and understanding. Research stations were built on GX-227, jointly operated by human scientists and Crest warriors, studying the remnants of the ancient civilization they'd discovered. And if during particularly cold expeditions, humans and Crest warriors occasionally engaged in what they steadfastly referred to as tactical heat-sharing, well, that was just good diplomatic relations. Years later, when asked about that first encounter on the ice planet, Kate would always smile and say the same thing. Sometimes the greatest discoveries come from the most unexpected situations, even if those situations involve sharing body heat with an alien warrior who initially threatened to let you freeze. Dax would just click his mandibles and mutter something about tactical survival procedures, but those who knew him well could see the warmth in his golden eyes when he did.